Good morning, everyone here. It's a great honor being in Sarasota, but also being able to come to the US. I want to talk to you this morning about something which I would think is almost revolutionary in a way. It's a small revolution that's ongoing. We hear a lot about fake news, we hear a lot about disinformation, misinformation, and some people even say we're living in the post-truth era. But I want to show you something that the internet is not only enabling these kind of misinformation and whatever you may want to call it, but that it also enables a lot of people worldwide to cooperate and to work together with each other to uncover the facts. And in the upcoming 20 minutes, I want to show you how we're following, so to say, the digital breadcrumbs. So this is a very new way of investigating. We call it open source or online open source investigation, which means you're using any kind of information that is publicly available online to investigate corruption, to investigate murders, to investigate conflict, to investigate basically anything you want. And online open source information, it's traditional media, which is publishing photos and is publishing claims and statements. But what is especially very interesting are social media, right? So we have Snapchat, Facebook, Weibo in China, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Odnoklassniki in the Russian-speaking world, Periscope, you name it. There's many of those social media out there. Then you have very other services like marine trafficking services, Strava, the Fitbit, where people work out, Vessel Finder, and other services to do like phone directories and so on. But what is very interesting is the amount of public available satellite imagery that has become available in the past 10 years or so. So everybody knows probably Google Maps, but there are many other services like that. Planet, for example, Yandex Karty, which is the Russian equivalent of Google. And the amount of satellite imagery that's available nowadays for anyone with an internet connection really creates this kind of global transparency related to certain cases. And I want to show you some of those cases. But before doing so, I want to show you the sheer quantity of information that's nowadays online. Just bear in mind, the war in Syria started in 2011, and there is more online footage, there are more hours of online footage of that conflict than that there have been hours of the actual conflict, which is bizarre. And I want to show you something related. This is not a serious case, but just to give you an impression of how much open source information is available. Here we see a sailor of a specific country, and he's going to Syria. And his country is shipping material and military goods to Syria. And if we want to know, as a journalist, as a researcher, what kind of equipment is being shipped towards the country and towards the war, it's not that we can go to the embassy and ask them very nicely, like, hey, what are you shipping towards the war? What are you using? So we need to find other ways. And one way is to find people that are on social media, that are on those ships, and maybe taking, just like you did, selfies. And they may be revealing some information on the background. Now, in this case, we don't see it here, but we do see that he is sailing, he's standing on this military ship, he's sailing towards a city. Now, this is the city of Istanbul, and it makes sense if Russia goes with ships to Syria, they need to cross the Strait of Bosporus in Istanbul in Turkey. And what I want to show is that while he is sailing through that strait, there's a lot of people filming the Strait of Bosporus. So here we have a ship spotter who's filming that same military ship. But we can also see that the footage is so HD that we can actually see somebody standing on the deck. And if we zoom in, we can see that this is the exact moment this guy had his photo taken. You can even see him standing like this. Now, this is the sheer amount of information that's available online, and two completely different sources which show the exact same incident. And that's what we're often trying to do. And a few years ago, 4 years ago, an investigative group was founded, Bellingcat, basically to bring those people that are doing these kind of investigations online, all voluntarily at the time, together. And the idea is as following. The name comes from this old Greek fable, where there is a group of mice, and they're afraid of this very large and dangerous cat. Because each time the cat comes close, the cat catches one of the mouse and it dies. And one day they come together in a room like this and they say, we really should do something about it. And one mouse has an idea. Says, okay, what if we put a bell around the neck of the cat? And each time it comes close, we're being warned. Yeah, great idea, everybody says. But then the execution of the idea is the problem, because everybody says, well, I'm not going to do it, because if I'm going to do it, I'm going to die. It's a very dangerous task. This is a very old fable, and the end of the story is that they don't bell the cat, because nobody wants to do it. And the idea behind belling cat is that we work together digitally as a group of mice to challenge those way more powerful actors out there, whoever it may be. And I want to show you some of the examples. But what is very important with online information is that you verify it, first of all. So I want to show you some very easy verification tricks. So let's have a look at this senator who is presenting evidence.
Just to demonstrate this, I brought back, and it's not a very fun thing to look at, but you have to understand what's happening there. Show the tank, hold up the tank one first. These are, Madam President, these are T-72 tanks. Now, Putin keeps saying we don't have any Russians in there with the separatists. It's not us. We're not doing it. Look, here they are. This is pictures we brought back with us. Those are the tanks, all lined up, all that within that area of Ukraine, and clearly that's what they are. Now,
so here we have a senator in U.S. Congress showing what he says is evidence that Russia is invading eastern Ukraine with tanks. Now, I wouldn't show him this example if it wouldn't be the evidence that he says it is. And it's very interesting because it would take literally less than 2 seconds on Google to find where these images are actually coming from. So I'm just going to give you one example. But if you, for example, take this image and we put it into a reverse image search on Google, which is basically, usually we use words to Google something, but you can also give images to Google, and they give back images that are visually similar. So if you put this image, for example, that he presents as evidence of Russia invading Ukraine, we can actually see that this is an image from years earlier showing Russian tanks lining up to enter Georgia. Now, geopolitically, it may have something related, but this is by no means evidence that the same is happening in Ukraine. Now, we do know that it's happening in Ukraine, but the photos he's showing are not evident of that. And this would have, he could have saved his face here with a few seconds of Googling, really. I want to show you a different example, more recent. This is Msnbc, one of the biggest cable news TV channels in the US, right? And this is in April this year, when the US decided with their two allies, the UK and France, to bomb locations in Syria because of a chemical attack that was carried out by the Syrian government. You may remember this. This was in April this year. It was a big deal because the US doesn't strike the Syrian government that often. Now, we have breaking news here on Msnbc, and they also display a video. Let's have a look at that video. So we see a dark city, we see some cars driving, and then there's explosions. So we can see explosions all over. Now, it may be very hard to verify this, but if I put that image into reverse image search, this time in Yandex, which is the Russian Google, I can see that the image, we can see the exact same place, right? We can see the white curtain here on the left, which you can see here. You can see the building here being lit, the street here, the lights. This is not in Syria, but this is a video from 3 years earlier from Luhansk, which is eastern Ukraine. So again, this took me literally 2-3 seconds. Why is nobody doing that? But that reverse image search I'm talking about, it can get even worse. Or worse, scarier. Now, you are all taking your pictures, uploading it to the internet. That's all information you often give to commercial companies. Now, related to this chemical attack in Syria, the Netherlands, where I'm originally from, also allegedly foiled an attempt of 4 Russian secret agents to disrupt the work of the OPCW, which is the Organization on the Prohibition of the Use of Chemical Weapons. They were investigating that incident in Syria, for which the US was bombing the Syrian government. So it's all linked. But the interesting thing is that the Dutch, but as well as the US Department of Justice, released the names of the 4 individuals involved. And the Dutch published a passport file of this guy. Oh, sorry. We go one back. This is the passport file. They give all the information. On top is the logo of the Dutch Ministry of Defense. And we can see a photo here of him. Now, be aware, this is allegedly a Russian military intelligence officer, someone who needs to be very, very careful about his, so to say, digital breadcrumbs, right? If I put his face into a reverse image search in Yandex, this is the Russian Google, I get a lot of results of similar faces right here, and many of them are not the same. But if I have a look at this one, remember, the guy's name is Alexei, who was born in, I don't wear my glasses, so let me have a look. He was born in 1977. This is 2018. I put his face into reverse image search. I find his picture, which links back to a dating profile, mylove.ru. And his name is Alexei, who is, look at this, 41 years old. Remember, 1977, 2018. A little bit more research showed that we actually found his real dating profile, which is bizarre because he is an intelligence officer, not someone who needs to be public. I mean, it's not bizarre that he needs love. Everybody needs love, but it's, by the way, it's a bit sad because you can see here, Alexei has not received any gifts. Oh, it's a bit sad. Funny detail, by the way, if you look at the photo here, you can see the Panasonic logo in the background. So if you start just Googling Panasonic in Moscow, in Russia, and there's one building you can quickly find. And then you can use not only the satellite imagery, but actually the ground perspective view of Google Street View. This is yellow person, right? You drop it on the map. You can look around. Well, there's in many places in the world it's available. And the funny thing is if I drop it here close to that Panasonic building, so here is the river, and here right next to me here, this is the Russian Ministry of Defense. But look at this. I zoom in, and I can actually see that Panasonic sign right there. So maybe in a lunch break, he took a picture for his dating profile. Yeah. I mean, it shows that, I mean, this is bizarre, because his photo was never published. He only had this photo. It's not the same photo. But the reverse image search, the facial recognition is so good of that search engine that it immediately, in seconds, it finds it back, which is a bit scary as well. But I want to show you
From
along
which
the case.
location was flight MH17 shot down? And
So in 2014, a civilian airliner was leaving from Amsterdam, Schiphol Airport, to Malaysia, to Kuala Lumpur. But you can see here the flight trajectory, and it's nearing Ukrainian airspace. And that same conflict, right, where the senator was talking about, where separatists backed by Russia are fighting the Ukrainian army, this airplane was flying over that territory. It was shot down out of the air. All 298 passengers on board, which had nothing to do with the conflict, died. And a lot of people were asking themselves the question, what happened to it? And this is a picture which was, in a way, like people were making fun of all the different theories that were surrounding the incident. People were saying it was shot down by a jet, it was shot down from the ground, and so on. There's always a conspiracy theory that the US shot it down or whatever. But online, people were wondering, who can we trust? Is it the US statement? Is it the Ukrainian statement? Is it the Dutch statement? So people were wondering, can we figure out the facts ourselves using digital information? Because it's hard to travel sometimes to areas under control of certain groups. So this became a photo that was very important. It was uploaded on social media before the aircraft was shot down. And what we see here is something very interesting. People said it was taken in eastern Ukraine. And we see here heavy anti-air equipment. This is called a BUK, anti-aircraft missile launch system. And that is obviously interesting. One of the theories was that the MH17, the civilian airliner, was shot down from the ground with such heavy equipment. Now, what would be interesting to figure out where was this photo taken, because if we know where it was taken, we could see, well, maybe who is controlling this book. Now, we always look for visual details, and here we see the name of a shop, which is spelled in Cyrillic, in Russian, Stroidom. And we start just Googling the name. I mean, that's how you start always, right? I mean, and we find CycloWiki, don't ask me why, but you have people that list shops in towns and villages in eastern Ukraine. I don't know why, but it's very useful because here we can see Magazine Stroidom, the same name, in a place called Torres. So you start Googling more and you find a court document, which is not so interesting, was some kind of fight above the bar. But what is interesting is the court document lists the address of the shop. So now I can go to Google Earth, and I can fly towards the exact location right here where the shop allegedly is. So now I can compare what I see in the satellite image and what I see in the ground photo. So that's not all. I can thereby confirm the location, but I can also look for other clues. Like, for example, this is the shop. So we found the address of the shop. But I can also look just like I did with the Panasonic one in Moscow, look for other visual clues and ground footage, reference footage from the ground. So look at this building. We can see it has some very interesting details in the middle, like an advertisement, but also these kind of black and white stripes on the side, right? Now, there's no Google Street View in Torez, in eastern Ukraine. But I can mimic Google Street View by looking for dashcam videos from that town. Again, don't ask me why, but people upload dashcam videos from random places. So here we have a person driving through Torres. And on the right, we can see the shop, the yellow sign of the shop right here. And look what we have here. It's that same building with those stripes. Here's another one, another dashcam video. We can see again a person driving through that city, Torres, small place. And here on the left, wait for it, we can see the yellow sign of the shop. Here it is. And here we can again see the building, right? So in this way, we're able to confirm thousands of kilometers away from the conflict where that book was spotted. And with people that were actually on the ground, including journalists, we could say, hey, these are the coordinates of the place. If you go there, you could ask residents, hey, do you have more footage? Did you see this book passing by? And this is, for example, a comparison where we can see it's a different season, but this is a footage and this is the photo, and we can see it's the exact same location. So from digital, from distance, we were able to determine where this photo was taken. Now, this is just one of many photos of that same book, of that same anti-aircraft missile system. And this was interestingly in separatist-held territory, so separatists that are fighting the Ukrainian government. And we could also determine the time of the day, right? Because we can see very large shadows. We now know the exact location. What we call geolocation, determining exactly where a photo has been taken, enables something else which we call chronolocation. Because if you know the exact location, you can often figure out the exact time of the day as well. And here we have the shadows, and there's a great tool called SunCalc where we can actually use the shadows to measure the direction and the time of the day. I mean, think of it. A sundial is the oldest, I think one of the oldest way we as human beings have a sense of time, right? You put a stick in the ground and you can see how the shadow changes during the day. It's quite a lot. So in that way, we can use it digitally as well to verify when a photo was taken. Well, in this way, we were able to map all these different bits of digital breadcrumbs on a map and seeing how this missile launcher traveled through eastern Ukraine and eventually also near the place where MH17 crashed and was shot down. But that was not all, because at the same time, there's this information campaign ongoing. And the Russian Ministry of Defense had a press conference 4 days after that airplane was shot down, saying what they said is the evidence regarding this case. Now, here they presented a satellite image, which is very interesting. We can see this was the 14th of July, 2014, 3 days before MH17 was shot down. And they say, look at this. This is a Ukrainian military base, and right here, there is a Buk M1. They write it down here. A Buk M1 system can be spotted at this Ukrainian military base. And then they say, look at this. This is a satellite image of the 17th of July, the day that MH17 was shot down, and that Buk is missing. Now, that's very interesting, right? Because we see that Buk in eastern Ukraine. This is a Ukrainian military base as well in eastern Ukraine, which is still held by the army. So what's going on? They say, well, hey, Ukraine has something to explain because they missed that Buk on that day. Now, when the Iraq war started, I think I was like, I was 11. And so I don't remember much of it. I remember when the invasion started. But I do remember later on when I started studying and so that we had to see like Colin Powell holding up the satellite imagery of this is the proof of weapons of mass destruction and so on. Which is very interesting because as a journalist at the time, what can you do? You can't go, you don't have your own satellite in the air. So you just need to believe what is visible in the satellite image. And the Russian MOD, the Russian Ministry of Defense, is trying to do the same thing here. But now, years later, a decade later, things have changed. Remember what I said about satellite imagery? Anybody with an internet connection can nowadays access satellite imagery and can go to this location. And look at this. If we compare the satellite image with publicly available satellite image, we can see some discrepancies. This is not something hard. This is basically just spot the differences as a kid would play. This is really, it's not hard. So look at this patch of trees. We can see it's trees with a path cut through it. And this is publicly available satellite imagery from the same location on the 17th of July. And we can see that the trees have been cut down, which is interesting, but it could be the case. Maybe the Ukrainian summers are as cold as Florida right now, and they needed a lot of wood to make a fire. I don't know. Could be in 3 days. But look, if we use historical satellite imagery of that same month, we can see that on the 17th of July, but also on the 2nd of July and on the 21st of July, there are no trees standing there. So how on earth is it possible that on the July 14th, the Russian MOD has a picture of that location where there are suddenly trees? That's impossible. And this led us to look further into the Russian side of the story. And we were looking for these specific book units. If it wasn't coming from Ukraine, could it be that the book, the anti-aircraft missile, was coming from the Russian side of the border? Which is one problem, as we see in this video. There are many of those books. This is a video from the Russian side of the border, just showing a military convoy. Now, how could we be sure that we're tracing the right vehicle? And here we can see one of those images, and what we started doing is comparing each and every image we had of that book missile launcher, looking for unique characteristics of that book. So we can see the number here. We can see the tactical signs next to it. But there's a problem because they can be painted over and they fade and whatever. We can also see here a black spot. But most importantly, we could see that this kind of protection layer above the wheels damages along the way such a vehicle is being used. And we call this the fingerprint of the vehicle. Just like a car that has a scratch, it becomes unique characteristics to the vehicle. And what we did is we built a, here we can see the dent, for example. We built a database of all the book missile anti-aircraft launches that were spotted in the eastern side of Ukraine and the western side of Russia, compared them all with each other, that fingerprint, and see if we were tracing the right vehicle. And we could see, we could trace that same vehicle back. So these are the digital breadcrumbs, so to say. June 25, June 24, all those icons you see are geolocations of footage. And June 23. And eventually the trace ends near a city called Kursk. And that's interesting because the license plates also had the military district Kursk on it, 50. So what you start doing? Well, you can go to Google, you type in, maybe there is an anti-aircraft brigade in Kursk. Anti-aircraft, Kursk. So that's what I type in. The first result is the Wikipedia page, the 53rd Anti-Aircraft Brigade, stationed in Kursk. Now, that's one thing, but the great thing is that they're also on social media, and they were so kind to put an attendancy list on social media. So now we have names, and we could put those names in social media, and we find photos of them. And they're even so kind to tag each other in the photo. So this photo is not that interesting, but they had a lot of photos on there showing the military convoy, which was for us a lot of new open source evidence related to this case. Now, that was not all. Sometimes we would even post in front of the name of the village where they were passing through. This is Milorovo, which is very close to the Ukrainian border. My time is up, but I'm almost done. I just want to go to the end of this. In this way, it was not only them, but also their wives sometimes and their mothers on online fora discussing, hey, he hasn't called for 4 days. He said he can't call for the next week. All this kind of information is publicly available and gave us a better insight how that book was transferred to Ukraine. Now, eventually, we were able to see who's responsible for the specific unit, but also to see actually the people that were responsible for the specific book unit. So not the whole brigade, but the specific book unit. This was really the first time, I think, on such a large scale, it was possible to see what open source information can mean in such a tragic accident where almost 300 people died and were killed. And everybody was saying, well, we didn't do it. But actually social media, satellite imagery, was able to show what was going on. And all the information we found has also been confirmed now by the official criminal investigation. I need to stop talking, but I just want to let you know, I hope that I could give you a little bit of an insight what we're doing. We do way more stuff. We do environmental stuff. We look into white nationalist rallies. We look into targeted bombings in Yemen. You name it, we do a lot of different stuff. And the great thing is that more recently we did the investigation into Skripal, which was the former Russian spy that was poisoned in the UK. And we were able to discover the real identities of the two people that were allegedly the ones that poisoned him and his daughter. And you can see here some of the US media reporting about our findings. I want to end with a note is that this group of mice is just growing. Like I said, we all started as volunteers. It's really great to see people from Iraq, from Pakistan, from the United States, from Colombia, all joining this growing community of mice. And hopefully, eventually, we'll be able to be holding more actors to account. Thank you very much for your attention.